Hi everyone! Thank you for joining us for our Fun Patch Friday, and congratulations to everyone who made it through this long week. So today we are going to explore and really get a better understanding as to what is the census, why should I participate, and how does participating in a paper form going to affect my community and potentially my school. All right, and just as a reminder, I will be here every Friday on Instagram Live page doing Fun Patch Friday activities where girls can do a family-friendly activity and earn a patch while doing it at no cost to you. All right, are you ready to jump in? Let's go. All right, so I'm going to give you a couple of facts about what is the census and what, by participating, where does that data go and how does it affect your community and the resources allocated to it. So as mandated by the U.S. Constitution, America gets just one chance each decade to count its population. The U.S. Census Bureau counts every resident in the United States. It is mandated by Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, and this takes place every 10 years. Not only do we have to count people, we have to know where they live so we can provide an accurate population number for those specific counties, states, and municipals. And for those of you that are watching right now that live in our beautiful state of Texas, Texas is huge. We have so many cities and so many smaller counties just around our specific city. So these numbers are used to draw school and voting districts. The census data, as I mentioned, is collected every 10 years, which is why you might hear it being referred to as the decennial census. Just a little trivia. And this determines not only your representation in Congress, but it also determines how funds are spent in your community on things such as roads, schools, and hospitals. The 2020 census uses a new design that has incorporated online and phone response options in addition to the traditional paper option. So if your mom or dad lost their in-mail census form, no worries. Just visit census.gov and you can fill out your form either online or by calling the hotline and get it done fairly quickly without any paperwork. These online response options allow people to respond not only on their desktop computers, but laptops, smartphones, and even tablets. So now we're going to take a deeper look as to how the census effectively helps you and your community. But first, you might be wondering, when do I need to fill this out by? Is it too late? I got my form 2 months ago, but I haven't filled it out. Can I still submit? Great question. If you visit 2020census.gov, you'll be able to look at a whole list of various deadlines. But essentially, the main guidance that the United States Census is advising is that any online, phone, or mailed self-responses through the data collection process are currently open. So it's not too late. You can still submit your form and you have up until October 31st. And this was after they've given us an extension. The original extension was July 31st, but due to COVID and making sure that everyone gets counted, they've extended the deadline till October 31st. But that doesn't mean you should wait till the last minute. Go ahead and visit my2020census.gov to fill this out with your family, and you can earn your fun patch for this 2020 census fun patch. All right, so now we're going to discuss how participating in the census really helps you and your community. Communities use this information to plan bus routes, to draw school district boundaries, and offer a variety of community services. Businesses use census data to decide where to put a store, an office, or even a nuclear plant. These new locations create countless jobs and support your local community's economy. Businesses then also use this information to determine what they should sell in their stores so that way communities get specifically what they need. The information helps your community by receiving funding from the federal government. And just out of curiosity, I'm going to ask a question. How much money do you think the government allocates by people who have participated in the census data collection process? I'll let you think about it. No number is too big or too small. So go ahead and type in your responses if you think you know, and I will disclose the answer here shortly. All right. Have you thought about it? You got an answer? Let me hear you. All right. Well, the census data, if you respond to the census, again, like I said, it helps your community at large to get its fair share of funding to your community each year. And the census data will determine how more than $675 billion in federal funding gets distributed to different states and local communities, such as our beloved San Antonio. And as we know, we could use a lot of resources. So we are going to do a little fun activity by exploring the historical context of the census. And for those that are wanting to learn more, again, you can go to 2020census.gov and fill out your nice little questionnaire with your family. And again, you can respond online, by the phone, or via mail. All right, I see we have a question popped up, and it says, who should respond to the 2020 census? Good question. The 2020 census counts everyone living in the United States, and including its 5 territories, such as Puerto Rico, America Samoa, the Commonwealth of Northern Mariana Islands, Guam, and the Virgin Islands. If you're wondering who should respond, should all of us respond to the census? That's a great question. Only one person should respond for the entire household, and that person needs to be at least 15 years old. They should also live in the home or place of a residence themselves and know general information about each person living there. And you want to make sure that you're including all the people that live in your household, even if that means grandma and grandpa, your cousins, a friend, extended family, your aunts, your uncles, whoever is under that one household should all be counted. We want to make sure we know how many people are living not only in your community, but also in your city along with your state. But good question. All right. So jumping into our activity, we are going, now that I have kind of gone over a couple of important details about the census, we are going, okay, I'm going to pause. All right, we're picking up midway point through my video for Census 2020, Fun Patch Friday, take 2. All right, now we're gonna do a little activity that I pulled from the census2020.gov website. And if you want to find out some family fun activities, please visit 2020census.gov. All right, so as I mentioned, a census is a full count of every man, woman, and child within a specific geographic territory. A census is different from a survey in that it is a full count of people, whereas a survey, such as the American Community Survey, is really a sampling in which information is obtained from a subset group of the population. Some census have been a fundamental part of government throughout history. The censuses were useful for jurisdictions for purposes such as taxation, labor, or military drafts. Just a couple of examples throughout history that date back to the census. Back in the 16th century BCE, the pharaoh in Egypt conducted a census so he could determine how big his kingdom really was. Also, William the Conqueror ordered a census of England, which was compiled in the Doomsday Book of 1086 BCE, and the Inca and other Southern American cultures used a quipi, which is a knot record, to really count populations for the purposes of taxation. So just a little bit of trivia there on how other cultures have used a type of census throughout history to really get a better understanding of how large their kingdoms or their territories included people living in that area. All right. And if you want to look at a little bit more data collected from the last census, you can visit data.census.gov. And you can look up all kinds of very unique facts. All right. So the government allocates funding for community programs and services such as schools, roads, or hospitals based on certain details of the population. Knowing how many students are in each grade level allows the government to better understand how many schools are needed in specific areas. Where more teachers or more schools may be needed, and which type of schools need funding the most. So now we're going to do a quick activity. I want you to imagine the school that you attend, right? I know this past year was a little hard with COVID, but imagine going back in the fall, seeing all your friends, talking to them, seeing them in person, having just a good old time. Now imagine all the different issues and potentially problems that your school faces. And that can be different from school to school, from county to county, or district to district, right? SAISD might have different issues than, say, North ISD. And Edgewood might have different issues than, say, Southwest ISD, right? Because they're all located in different regions. Therefore, they have different needs and different populations that they serve. So imagine your school, and imagine your school received a $50,000 grant to spend on something new, specifically for your school and your school only. So in order to figure out how this wonderful grant is going to be spent, right? And you can spend it on anything. You can spend it on clubs, You can spend it on sports, technology. Maybe you need a new gym. Maybe you need new vending machines, right? The list goes on. So think about how this money could effectively work and support the needs of your students, of your teachers, of your faculty, of the staff, and potentially even parents, right? Maybe your school has a lot of kids that just hang out outside in the front waiting for parents to pick them up. Maybe y'all want to invest in a covered awning because during those hot months in August and September, it gets pretty hot and y'all want some nice shade covering so you're not sweating until mom and dad picks you up, right? So let's think about different ways we can spend that money. But first, before we can figure out how the money should be spent, we should have students conduct their very own census. And in order to do this, you're going to want to gather information about your classmates. So you can use the data collected to inform your decision making about how to spend this grant money. And please make a note that for the students, sorry about that. So go ahead and jot down some questions and think about, who are your student population? Go ahead and take out some pen and paper and write down at least 4 questions that you can think about that would help you determine the type of classmate that you have in your school. And you might go to junior high school, a junior high, and it might be only select grades. So maybe one of the questions is, what grade are you in? Another question could be, are you male or are you female, right? Because maybe female needs are different than male needs. Maybe we should talk about education levels. Maybe you want to ask them, do you play sports? Are you in any extracurriculars? Right? Because by determining the types of activities that the students are participating in, that might help you decide the percentage of funds that get allocated to extracurriculars. So I'll give you a moment to come up with a couple of questions on gathering information about the type of students that are in your school. And if you're in a school that's K through 12th grade or K through 8th, then you might want to ask them, how old are you? And did you need someone to help you read these questions, right? Because a kindergartner might not be able to read. And that's a very legitimate question. So go ahead, take a minute, and figure out what questions you're going to write. Another question might be, how do students get to and from school, right? Because if not every student relies on mom and dad to take them to school, what other way would they get to school? They might get to school via bus, right? So if there's only one bus and there's only 30 seats on that bus, but you have 60 kids that need to take a bus to get to school, well, guess what? We might need to allocate some funds or designate some money to make sure we have enough buses to ensure kids are getting to and from school. Another question to think about is, what types of issues within your community are students most interested in addressing or fixing? And this could be a very important question, especially if kids are very concerned about maybe disciplinary issues. Maybe they're concerned with training kids and teachers on anti-bullying tactics, right? We all know that bullying is an issue that each school addresses separately. All right, now that you have your questions, I've given you a couple of minutes. So you can also do this with a friend, another troop member in your Girl Scout troop. And so once you have your questions, you're going to want to go ahead and list them out, right? And you want to think about, like, is this a multiple choice or is this in a fill in the blank, right? And these are all valid questions to ask. Now, once you created your questionnaire, go ahead and give it to a friend to fill out all the questions. By doing the sample survey or census, you might realize, oh, we didn't ask specific questions that we need more information on. And so this little activity kind of gives you a better understanding about the complexity of when you're trying to serve a community of X amount of people from state to state. We have 50 states in the United States, just within this continent, not counting Puerto Rico or Guam or some of the other U.S. territories, right? So we have to think outside the box. We have to think about all kinds of people from various walks of life with different educational levels and how that might be a hindrance to completing a census. Also, too, you might have kids that don't use English as a primary language. So maybe one of the questions you might want to consider adding is what language are you most fluent in? All right. Now, another activity we are going to do, I'm going to read you the article in the Constitution, the specific article in the Constitution that designates the census. And I'll ask you a quick question. All right. So the Article 1, Section 2 reads as, representation and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of Congress of the United States and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. All right. For some of you, that might have been very hard to understand, as that's old English and legal jargon too. So question number 1, what was the purpose of the census as written into the Constitution? So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to think about what I just read, and I'll read it again too, but the question you want to consider is, what was the purpose of the census as written in the Constitution? And so I will read it again. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union. According to their respective numbers, the actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. Which basically means as this law directs. So yes, it was written into the Constitution. So I kind of gave part of my answer away, but I'll give you another minute to think about what was the purpose, the specific purpose that was written into the Constitution of the census. All right. If you're still writing, go ahead, keep writing. But essentially, what this specific article in the Constitution was stating that by conducting a census, again, every 10 years, should determine representation in the U.S. House of Representatives, such that all people, regardless the size of your state, are represented fairly in Congress, right? So if we're looking at Texas, which is a huge state compared to Iowa or compared to another small state, there's going to be a big difference in the population size of Texas to the size of Iowa, or even Puerto Rico, which is a little bitty island off the Caribbean, right? So as we think about this, and this has been debated at ad nauseum, the people that wrote the Constitution wanted to make sure that despite the size of your state, you had fair representation in the governing bodies, such as the House of Representatives. So which is also why it is so important, hashtag representation matters, which is why it's so important, because if half of the state of Texas does not fill out the census, well, guess what? We're only going to get half of the number of representatives in Congress. We'll end up getting the same amount of representatives as some of the smaller states, and potentially even less, right? So it's so important because the census really does determine how many representatives each state is given in the U.S. House of Representatives. And not only that, it affects more than $675 billion a year, which is spent on federal programs. So what are some of the federal programs we think might be included? How many of y'all go to school? Raise your hand. It's okay if you're by yourself and you're watching this. How many go to school? How many of you use a road every day? Or maybe not every day, but every month. Or when you're going to the store? Raise your hand. How many have you used a hospital since you were born? Right? How many have you been to the library? How many of you eaten at your cafeteria for the lunch program at school? Right? Those are all considered federal programs. And the government determines how much funding each community program or specific service gets specific funding by the U.S. Census. That's right. So knowing how many people live in a specific city or municipality determines how those funds then get passed down. All right. Now going back to our question and portion. So I see we have a question pop up, and it's basically asking, if I fill out the Census 2020, is my data safe? That is a good question. So the Census Bureau is bound by specific codes, U.S. codes, to keep your information confidential. So if you do fill out the census, your data or any answer that you put out in the form, whether it's online or via the phone, is protected. It's protected from landlords, from potentially raising prices or evicting a family, especially if it is a large family. And it's also protected from any legal or authority, legal organizations such as the police department or any institutions such as ICE or Homeland Security. This law protects your answers to the 2020 census. The census cannot release any identifiable information about you, your home, or your business, even to law enforcement agencies. This law ensures that your data is remained private and is protected, and that any of your answers cannot be used against you by any government agency or court. So if you have an aunt or uncle or potentially a grandparent who might have some track record with a law enforcement agency, or say you have a family member or a friend who is under DACA and is afraid of deportation, then they cannot, if they participate in the census, their information about their legal status, about their legal background is protected. And I know that is a big concern, especially in today's climate. So the short of it, the answers you provide are used only to produce statistics, and you are kept anonymous. The Census Bureau is not permitted to publicly release your responses in any way that might identify you or put you or anyone else in your home at harm. So thank you for that question. And again, we have another question about when can I submit my information to the census data. So by visiting my2020census.gov, you can begin either by filling your responses online or by phone or by the packet you received in the mail. And right now, the census is currently accepting forms and responses. It started back in March 12th, and they have extended the deadline just due to COVID and stay-in-place orders across the various states and the country to keep us safe. And so the new deadline is October 31st, and that's if you're responding via a self-response via mail, via phone, or online. Well, I think that's my time for today. So again, go ahead. By earning this patch today, all you need to do is sit down with your family, fill out the census by visiting 2020census.gov. Again, we want to make sure everyone is